GM. Sorry I didn't kill the music right in between songs. I could have done that 3 minutes ago, or I could have waited another 3 minutes, and I figured time is of the essence. Welcome everyone to an update on FoxChain. Um, Today we're going to go over what progress has been made since the last community update. We're going to revisit a couple of concerns that some of you community members have expressed. And I'm also going to be releasing some detailed documentation about FoxChain, which has already been published to the ShapeShiftDAO Notion page. There will not be any slides or synchronous content that you'll have to follow along visually via Zoom today, but there will be a bunch of references to the documentation that's been published to our Notion DAO. If you want to follow along with the specific pages I'll be talking about, take a look at the FoxChain section. I guess we'll dive in. So I'll start with just a quick recap of where we were when we last chatted and where we are today. Then I'd like to dive into some of the historical concerns, and then finally walk through the updated documentation that was just announced today. At any time, if you have any questions, I'd like this to be as interactive as possible. Please either type your question in the stage chat or raise your hand here on the Discord stage, and I'd be happy to pull you up. Anyone else who's also been working on FoxChain on the sidelines, if you'd like to join me on stage, you are absolutely welcome to, but please don't feel obligated to either. All right, I'm going to take one big swig of tea and then get ready to dive in. Ow, that's hot. All right. So I believe the last time we all chatted was about 1 month ago when we announced to the ShapeShiftDAO that through a lot of work and a lot of effort trying to make the FoxChain vision a reality using the existing Fox token, we realized that there were dozens of problems that all went away immediately if we launched a brand new token. So we made that announcement. We answered a couple of questions for those of you who were available and online at the time. Since then, a lot of work has been done to vet the current design and to flesh it out in more rounded out documentation. But before we dive into that, I have been following some of the conversations in the chat about why do we need a new token? So I'd like to start there. By taking one step back, we will prepare ourselves for going a couple of steps forward. So some of the problems that we ran into with using just the Fox token and nothing else, the biggest problem was that it would be incredibly taxing on the ShapeShiftDAO's treasury. One of the benefits that you get with a new token is the ability to expand or contract the supply at will. A lot of Cosmos-based tokens, they reward users for delegating and for validating with the issuance of brand new tokens that are deposited directly into their account in the form of delegation rewards. If FoxChain is going to be incentivizing people to run these data hosts in the early days, that money has to come from somewhere, and that would be the ShapeShift treasury. I'm sure it's not lost on a lot of you in the audience that like every other DAO and every other company in the current crypto bear markets, purse strings are getting tighter, and we don't want to spend money where we don't have to. The biggest fear that I had is if ShapeShift were to undertake this project and pay for everything out of its own pocket, it could find its treasury in dire straits. So that was the chief reason for using a new token, the simple economics of it. Another reason for the choice of a new token is it helps simplify the tokenomics of the system itself. Within a closed system, if money's going to be moving around from the left to the right, money has to be paid with some kind of, and it was a lot easier to have all that internally within its own isolated space rather than externally, where there are already many other pieces moving for the Fox token, such as the Fox farming rewards, the tokamak rewards, the Olympus incentives, and a variety of other pieces. With a closed system, it was a lot easier to plan out the tokenomics. Third reason was the cap of the Fox token. With 1 billion plus leaked tokens in circulation for the Fox token, we did not want to inflate that beyond that 1 billion. A lot of partnerships have been established with various DAOs. There have been token swaps that have occurred, and various people have been paid choosing the Fox token with the implicit understanding that there are only 1 billion plus leaked tokens. The moment we start changing that assumption for everybody, every single person who has chosen to accept Fox as a form of payment for the work that they do, they will find themselves with a token that is inflating, and it robs the value from the hands of everybody that is supporting of the ShapeShift DAO. So that was a third reason. Fourth reason was technical complexity. There are bridges that allow people to move ERC20 tokens from the Ethereum chain onto a Cosmos chain, and we could rely on some other group to come up with a bridge between the ERC20 Fox token and the Cosmos Fox token. And we could alter a lot of the Cosmos SDK stuff so that there is no native token on the chain, and you have to import all the tokens from IBC. But a lot of that stuff hasn't really been tested, and it dramatically increased the complexity of FoxChain with the Fox token. And a lot of that disappeared when we decided to use a new token. Those are a couple of reasons. Willie, thanks for jumping up alongside me. Do you remember any of the other reasons? Did I leave any out of this quick summary of why we've chosen to use a new token?
I think you covered it well, Michael. To be honest, I was a little distracted while you were talking too. I wanted to come up here and give you some moral support. Real quick, before we dive into that, is it okay? I just saw that the FoxChain Notion page is only accessible to members of the Notion. Do you mind if I make it open to everybody who has the link real quick?
Thanks for catching that. I didn't realize. Yes, please.
Sweet. Okay. So now if anyone checks that link that Michael posted again, you'll be able to see it, even if you're not a member of the Notion.
Awesome.
Yeah,
thanks, Willie.
From what I did here, I think you covered it well. There's a lot of technical challenges to using the existing Fox for this that just simply do not exist if we use a new token. I think the inflationary aspect is a really important variable. If we use the existing Fox, then the DAO will basically have to fund the rewards to incentivize validators to operate on FoxChain. Whereas if we create a new token, it's very common and kind of expected for there to be inflation. So we can use that inflation to incentivize validators while we work on ramping up the fees to eventually replace the inflation. Also, I think the governance, I'm not sure if you touched on this one, but they very much are different projects, right? If FoxChain, while ShapeShiftDAO needs FoxChain to exist in order to have a truly decentralized product, they are very different and unique projects that oftentimes it can be beneficial to have dedicated, focused communities, and for those communities to be focused on the immense challenges that each one is solving, right? ShapeShiftDAO has plenty of challenges related to its own product, and FoxChain will have plenty of challenges related to FoxChain. And the community members and the subject matter experts aren't necessarily the same for each project. So I do think there's additional benefits just from having the FoxChain token that's used for FoxChain governance be limited to FoxChain governance, and have the Fox token that's used for governance of the ShapeShiftDAO be limited to the decisions for the ShapeShift DAO. And if you start thinking about that, you can see just the other can of worms and technical challenges that are opened up when you think about governance and how right now the Fox tokens control the ShapeShift DAO treasury, and FoxChain will have its own form of governance. And trying to merge the two just opens up another incredibly complex can of worms that can just be avoided by creating a new token.
Thanks for that, Willie. The separation is a very important part. I'm glad that you brought that up. We all know the mission of the ShapeShift DAO to build a decentralized user interface for all of the cryptocurrencies that the users want. That is a different mission than what FoxChain is trying to achieve. FoxChain is trying to achieve a way to incentivize people to host data. It's an address book and an incentivization layer for blockchain data. And those two missions, although they do go hand in hand, and ShapeShift will absolutely be the first consumer of all this this data, the missions are distinctly unique. And where ShapeShift is going out of its way to fund this project, and it's putting its money behind all the people who have so far contributed to FoxChain. It's still very much a different project, and that sort of leads into one of the other reasons for a new token, and that is to. I apologize. 1 second. So sorry, I need 20 seconds. I'll be right back. I apologize, everyone.
Oh, all right. Looks like I got a stall. I had a great professor who was teaching us about public speaking. And she said, you never want to be up on stage and be silent, right? That's just super awkward. So whatever you have to do, even if it just means rambling, filling up time with words and stuff, she said, definitely do it. And look, here we are.
Thank you for that, Willie.
No silence. You bet.
So sorry, everyone. I was in the middle of a sentence. One of the biggest concerns with using a new token for Fox holders is that it's not going to directly benefit the Fox tokens that you're all holding today. And it's not necessarily going to directly benefit the DAO. I'm happy to lay those fears to rest because the airdrop that is still being planned, one of the biggest tranches of recipients for the airdrop will be Fox token holders. So already, if you hold a Fox token, you're guaranteed to receive some of the new tokens that will be airdropped. And because the ShapeShift Treasury, who has chosen to fund the research and development of this project, because the ShapeShift Treasury holds a lot of Fox tokens, the ShapeShift Treasury stands to benefit massively from the airdrop that this new token will have. I can already hear, when is the airdrop happening? What's the snapshot date going to be? How many tokens does that mean I'm going to get? None of those specific details have been set in stone yet. So if you have comments or feedback on how you think the new token should be distributed, which groups should receive these new tokens, I encourage you to join the conversation and help craft the airdrop that is going to benefit many people around the world, including and especially ShapeShift Fox token holders. I think now is a good time to pause in case there are any other questions about the new token, and just to reaffirm the update that was given a month ago. I want to make sure that that is addressed very clearly before we move on to the next part of today's meeting, which is going over the new FoxChain documentation. I see someone with a lot of caps in their name that I will not try to pronounce. I attempt to separate the two projects out, but they are attached at the hip. Okay. It looks like this person is concerned that by issuing the brand new token, it is going to dilute the Fox token supply. I can assure you that the Fox token supply will not be touched at all when the new Fox chain goes live with whatever name it goes live with, and the new token is airdropped. So there will not be any dilution. The exact same amount of Fox tokens will exist before and after the future airdrop of new tokens.
Yeah, I think another thing to consider, probably an equation that a lot of Fox holders are doing, is like, okay, how much value will I get from this new token versus if FoxChain were to launch? And obviously, we can't guarantee anything. No one knows the answer to that. But I actually think there's a good case to be made that individual Fox holders could stand to benefit quite a bit more by receiving this new token versus if we utilize existing Fox. So let's just walk through that, right? If we utilize existing Fox, then your benefit as a Fox holder will be limited to the market movement that's caused by the launch of FoxChain, right? And people get really excited and go acquire Fox. But remember, if we were to use the existing Fox, that would mean that the DAO treasury is basically funding the rewards for validators with Fox from the treasury, which means that the ShapeShift DAO is depleting its treasury of Fox, and it's adding more Fox to the market. Some of which will likely be sold to fund the operation of these validators. On the flip side, if we get a new token, then Fox value itself, the market could still get very excited about ShapeShift launching FoxChain. The DAO itself will also receive a significant amount of this new Fox token. So that will increase the value of the ShapeShift DAO treasury rather than depleting it over time. And yeah, so there could still be upside to Fox from this. But additionally, you're getting a new token. And from what we've seen with the launch of these other tokens for Cosmos zones, we've seen some, if you look at them, you've seen a lot of these launches have been very successful. And that also includes launches for zones that initially have no functionality whatsoever. They have a roadmap, they have a page where you can claim your airdrop and stake. And that's about it. We'll be launching FoxChain with an operational, very unique and very valuable offering. Again, it's hard to speculate, but I do think there's a case to be made that individual Fox holders will get more upside from this new token versus if we were to utilize existing Fox, in which case the upside is limited to the additional utility that we've added to Fox and the hope that the market recognizes that and takes action, which I think is I think it's less likely, or would be less beneficial. But curious to hear what you think about that. No Life Finance DeFiver.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out which one of these words I should call them. I guess Wen. Wen, do you want to come on up? Okay. Seems like Wen made personal investments and for their own reasons, they chose to purchase the Fox token based on the Fox chain idea. They're now concerned about the value of the tokens that they hold, their own personal portfolio. A couple of times during the design of Fox chain, I actually ran into the very same conflict of interest myself. On the one hand, I wanted to do something that would pump up the value of the Fox token and thereby pumping up the value of my own personal portfolio. But in other cases, I wanted to do what was best for the decentralized data and what was best for the ShapeShift DAO as a whole. And a couple of times, those two priorities were competing against each other, although often those two priorities were addressed simultaneously as one. I still think it's important to acknowledge these types of conflict of interest and to make the decisions that benefit the DAO as a whole the most and or the project the most. If we sacrifice the ability to make a good and secure product for the ability to pump up our own portfolio, ultimately the portfolio will fall because the project isn't as successful in doing what it needs to do. Therefore, the value will slump. But if we make something that is great and attracts users and delights users, that thing will grow in popularity, will attract new users, will attract natural value accrual. And that is far more important, I think, to the longevity of both the ShapeShift DAO and the FoxChain project than pumping up any one or every one of our personal portfolios.
Very well said, Michael. I think that's an incredibly good point worth reiterating. Basically, like the team that was investigating FoxChain design came to the conclusion that the best FoxChain product, which is ultimately, if we want to be successful in the long term, which is absolutely the goal here. The goal with FoxChain is not at all to influence the price of Fox in the short term, but is to solve this problem. If we focus on building the best chain to solve this problem, then there's going to be lots of opportunity for upside, and the DAO will be successful. However, if we focus specifically just on the impact to Fox price, then and we sacrifice decisions that we think will actually lead to building the best chain, then we're going to fail. And so I think it's not even guaranteed that there would be more upside at all to Fox holders if we were to use the existing Fox. But one thing that we are very confident in is that it would create a lot of technical complexity, which would add to the time and the cost that it takes to bring FoxChain to market, and would also make it
written so far. Go ahead, Willie.
Oh, sorry. It would also make it more difficult for FoxChain to achieve success. And if we succeed with FoxChain, then I think there's tremendous opportunity there.
Yeah. Now actually might be a good time, Willie, to talk about the draft airdrop plan that we put together. I want to specify. I want to make sure that I stress the word draft, because this is made just by a couple of people that were working together, Willie and myself included, just to get a draft that we can start talking about it. This by no means is final in any way, and we'd love your thoughts on it. One of the pieces that I contributed to this draft is the idea of having no insiders at all for the airdrop. Too often we've seen airdrops have a big carve out. Let's say 25% of the circulating supply will go to the team building it, and then another 18% will go to early investors, and then another 12 will go to advisors. And before you know it, it's something like 50% of the entire supply is being held back for the pockets of very, very few people that are insiders. And that always leaves a very, very bad taste in my mouth. One thing that I suggested in the draft, and Willie seemed to agree with it and throw it in the draft, was to have a very simple airdrop pie. The pie is just split into two, 50-50. 50% of it is airdropped to the world. The other 50% goes into a community treasury, period. Everything that goes into that community treasury can be voted on by all the people who receive the airdrop in the other 50%. And we'll need a lot of carve-outs early on for things like, hey, let's issue back pay to the developers who actually built this thing out of nothing. So even the developers will be getting zero carve-out. The developers will only receive the same airdrop that every other recipient receives around the globe. And the first proposal would be, let's issue back pay from the community treasury to the developers. This means that every single airdrop recipient will have a say in whether the devs are asking for too much money or too little money, or which specific devs receive it. So that was one idea that I threw in there. Willie, are you able to share the URL to the Google Doc? Thank you. Willie just shared it in the stage chat. I encourage you to click on it and check it out. Again, this is just a draft, and if you have suggestions or ways or ideas on how you can improve this airdrop plan, now is the time, because we're still building it.
Yes, just posted that link there. Again, we'll reiterate, this is a very rough draft, and we would like everybody's feedback. but I like how it's shaping out so far. I really like Impericum's idea to keep it simple with basically two sections in the initial distribution, the community treasury and the airdrop. And then all the other things, there'll be no advisor percentage, there'll be no pre-sale or investors, there'll be no carve out for the team or for liquidity mining. All of that can, those can be the initial proposals that are made to the community themselves. I think especially for the launch of a chain that's whole mission is to increase decentralization, I think it makes a lot of sense to take that approach and give everyone a great first impression with this airdrop, which is so important when you are launching a new chain and doing an airdrop. There's another tab in there for the airdrop tab. So we're looking at who should receive this airdrop. Of course, we've got Fox holders and governance participants as the largest share because Fox token holders are funding the development of this. We also have the ShapeShift DAO would be included in that because it is a large Fox holder. Some other buckets we're looking at are Atom stakers of Cosmos, Osmos stakers and liquidity providers, Juno stakers, Cosmos governance participants potentially, so giving more to those who actually participate in Cosmos governance, ThorChain liquidity providers, Cosmos ecosystem validators, so validators that that run, for instance, validators for ThorChain. And we might even decide to give those Thornode validators an even bigger share because they're a great candidate to be FoxChain validators. Ethereum DAO, so you could potentially be customers of FoxChain. DAO members, we could decide if we want to just reward the governance token holders or specifically governance participants. And beta testers or FoxChain community members that are assisting with the testnet and helping with the design of FoxChain prior to launch. Again, these are just some ideas, and the numbers are drafted. We've got some time to figure this out, but this is definitely something that's worth putting a lot of thought into. We will be dropping a lot of value, and when you launch a token, the airdrop is one of the things that you have control over. It's really up to the community that's launching it to decide who gets airdrops, and because Fox token holders are the community that is designing this, that means you guys get to help decide this. And again, it really is worth putting a lot of thought into, and thinking about who are all the types of individuals that we want to be the initial governors of FoxChain. And yeah, a lot of effort will come into this. We'll definitely make sure, for instance, that Fox token holders on various chains are included, or Fox token holders who have their Fox in a DeFi position or strategy, or are holding success tokens, for example, or Foxy. That will be definitely some of the thought that goes into this. Other things we need to figure out, for example, are, is there a period that airdrop recipients need to claim their airdrop before it expires? Or should there be a decay rate? These are all the types of things that we still need to flesh out and would really appreciate community's feedback on. So if you're interested in this stuff, after this call, we can continue the conversation on this in the FoxChain public channel. This is definitely one of the things that I imagine we'll be continuing to discuss and iterate on this until we're ready to finalize it and actually do the airdrop and launch the chain.
Maybe now's a good time to switch over to the newly released documentation, or do you think we should talk a little bit more about the rough airdrop plans?
I like the suggestion for vesting for airdrop recipients, Marley. I think that's a great suggestion. Son of Odin, yeah. We do have node operators as we had them right now within the Cosmos ecosystem validators, and we have a note to potentially give Thornode validators a bigger share. I like where your head's at there. And that's just a great thing to think about. I really think that a lot of these Thornode validators will be great candidates for FoxChain validators, because in order to run a Thornode validator, you also have to run nodes for each for these various chains, many of which are the same chains that ShapeShift supports or wants to support. So basically, I'm hoping that a lot of the Thornode validators see FoxChain as an additional revenue stream that's easy for them an additional way for them to monetize the nodes they're already running. And of course, they've already got the skills to run a validator. So it should be a great fit.
Yes, although I would caution anyone who is undertaking running something like a Thor node to use the exact same infrastructure to also host or anything else. That increases the risk of problems. If now you have two sources of potential problems that could take out both, but that's up to the individual node operators to manage the risk. If they're already choosing to manage the risk of a Thor node, by comparison, the risk of running a open Bitcoin node or an open Ethereum node would pale in comparison.
I also liked Son of Noden's suggestion to require users to actually claim the airdrop. I think that's a great suggestion. I also think another example of something we should be thinking about is what actions are required for a user to claim their full airdrop. Oftentimes, Cosmos zones will require that users do an IBC transaction or stake the tokens or any other action that can be detected on chain before they actually receive their airdrop. I think it's a great point. Definitely, when we did the Fox airdrop, we specifically used a contract that enabled us to claim back any of the unclaimed airdrops. I think it was after 90 days. And I'm really glad we did that because, to your point, a lot of people don't claim their airdrops. A lot of the addresses are no longer even in use that will be airdropping to. And that's another thing for people to think about is that we can, after some period, we can take all of the unclaimed airdrops and then just add that to the community treasury. And I do think that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Regardless of the specifics of how we're going to be airdropping the tokens, who we're going to be airdropping the tokens to, what division do the airdrop tokens take, and who gets more, who gets less. One thing is unanimous amongst everybody that is working on FoxChain. We want the airdrop to go out to as many people as possible. We want a very wide net, and we don't want it restricted to any one ecosystem. The Fox token was airdropped within the Ethereum ecosystem, but really only just the Ethereum ecosystem. What's cool about FoxChain is that it allows people to run many different blockchain nodes. So in that spirit, I want to target people in the Cosmos ecosystem, people in the Ethereum ecosystem. People should be able to register Bitcoin, Litecoin, and other UTXO addresses. The more that we give out these tokens, the wider that we spread them about, I think the more utility they will have. Ultimately, this is all about hosting blockchain information, and it's not restricted to any one blockchain. Now, that may raise some concerns with the ShapeShift community to hear me say that I want this to be as wide as possible and to get out to as many people as possible. It's not lost on me that the ShapeShift DAO took $300,000 out of its own treasury and put it to this project to help kickstart it and help incubate it. Because of that risk and because ShapeShift took a financial risk where no other community did, that is one reason why I'm going to make sure that the ShapeShift Fox token holders are going to receive a larger portion of the airdrop than others. But it is still important that it is spread wide and far. And the concerns I stated earlier about having a very small number of insiders making the airdrop feel unfair, we'll have to balance the larger portion that ShapeShift token holders will receive with the distributed airdrop that goes to as many people as possible. All right. Unless there's any other questions about what we've discussed so far, I'd like to dive into some of the new documentation and just give an overview of where things are in these documents and highlight two changes that have been added to the FoxChain design that I think I'm really bullish about. I'm really happy with these changes. But I'm going to share the Notion link one more time, just so people don't have to necessarily scroll all the way up. Copy link. I'm going to paste it again in the ShapeShift DAO stage chat. If you'd like to follow along, please click there, and you should be looking at a very small landing page for FoxChain. This area of Notion contains high-level documentation of the FoxChain project. Under this, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 sub-pages that describe different pieces of it. First one is just an overview. What is FoxChain? And it describes the mission of FoxChain, which is a two-sided coin, one to be a phone book-like directory, so anybody can find any blockchain node that they need. The other is to provide an incentivization system so that people who want to list their node in that directory, they get paid money. The why FoxChain, I'm not going to go into over this call, but that describes the various use cases for FoxChain and what drove us to this point where we're building it. Of course, the name is still in flux. I don't know that it should be called FoxChain anymore, even though the ShapeShift DAO birthed the idea, because it is going to be a separate and distinct project from ShapeShift. Maybe the FoxChain name should go as well for something better. I had a birdie on my shoulder suggest the name of Hermes, which is the Greek messenger god. I'm personally, I don't really care what it is called as long as it does what it needs to do. It's not that I'm not a fan, Mr. Odin. It's that in my history of computer science, it seems like every classroom project, there's always at least one project named Hermes, named after the messenger god. It's a new messenger protocol. It's a new this. So I feel like it has been overused. But that said, I don't know of any Hermes in the blockchain space. So maybe it doesn't really matter. I think the ShapeShift DAO should run a contest on what to name the chain and what to name the token. And we should leave it up to a wider audience rather than little old me. And you're right, that is my bias, Odin. Okay, so under the how FoxChain, there are 7 links that start getting into a little bit of technical detail. I'm not going to get into a lot of the mind-numbing stuff, but I did want to touch on one piece of it that has emerged through a lot of different conversations with people both in person and online. Some of you are in this audience. Thank you very much for all the feedback and the assistance that you've given. In one of the earlier thoughts of FoxChain, we were trying to sort of fit a round peg in a square hole, and we had an idea that ultimately couldn't be fleshed out and turned into a feature of FoxChain. But the idea was, hey, you know how I can delegate to this Cosmos validator? Well, if I'm delegating to that Cosmos validator, that validator should be able to give me access to Bitcoin data or Litecoin data. And it would be very elegant if all these validators are earning their money with user delegations. Now, unfortunately, that didn't get fleshed out very well because we need more than just about 100, 120 Bitcoin data hosts. And we need more than 120 Ethereum data hosts. We need this thing to be able to scale to thousands upon thousands. And because of the upper limit of Tendermint consensus of about 120, 125 nodes, if we were to use delegations as the form of payment that validators receive, that means that we would have an upper limit of 120 or so Bitcoin, 120 or so Ethereum, and that simply would not scale the way that we want FoxChain to scale. So we shelved that idea and we kept on moving forward, but it was always in the back of my mind, and I always thought it would be really cool if we could have users basically fund the validators with their votes. And then after a few more thoughts over the last couple of weeks, a new sort of feature has emerged that I think allows us to have our cake and eat it too. And that is to separate the idea of delegating to a validator, which anybody who's dealt with the Cosmos ecosystem, they're familiar with delegating to a validator. But if we separate that mechanic and we introduce a new separate mechanic of funding votes, this all seems to work nicely. And this is something new that's been designed since the last FoxChain call, and I'm happy to talk about it publicly for the first time today. The idea is to have a new message call, a new type of Cosmos feature where users can cast funding votes. Now, if you're following along in the Notion, I'd invite you to click on How FoxChain, and then Incentives. How FoxChain Incentives, and under there is funding votes. This describes it in detail, but I'll talk about it here at a high level. The idea is every time you delegate a new token to a validator, you receive one funding vote per chain. So let's say you delegate 100 new tokens to a FoxChain validator. You now have 100 funding votes that you can give out to any data hosts that you like. Maybe you only like one data host, and Son of Odin, he hosts the best Bitcoin validator ever, so you give all 100 of your funding votes to the Son of Odin. But maybe when it comes to Ethereum, Willie Fox is the best Ethereum data host that you know of. So you give 100 funding votes for Ethereum to Willie. Once you've delegated 100 tokens, you get 100 funding votes for Bitcoin, 100 funding votes for Litecoin, 100 funding votes for Ethereum, and every other chain that is supported by FoxChain. And you give out these funding votes as a core piece of the incentives. Here's how it works. Whenever a data host puts their stuff online, they also establish one or more individual payment gateways. Maybe they want to get paid with a smart contract that locks up tokens and only really checks in every 1,000 requests or every 10,000 requests. Maybe they have just a direct payment. You pay $5 per month, and now you can access that Ethereum data. Whatever the gateway is that the data host chooses, all the payments are made online, on chain, I should say, between you and the data host that you are paying. Within the FoxChain system, a portion of every one of those funding payments gets and gets distributed. Under the funding vote page, if you scroll down about halfway, there's a pie graph of source of rewards. Now, as people are paying as people are paying data hosts through their gateways, that's one source of payments. There's also user actions. Every time a user casts a funding vote, every time a data host updates their payment gateways, or every kind of a user action is going to generate some revenue, because it'll cost, let's say, one new token or half of a new token in order to do. So that's going to be some income from the system, a small slice. There's going to be bootstrapped incentives. In the early days, it'll be a very inflationary token at first, similar to Bitcoin, which is very inflationary at first. But over time, those bootstrapped incentives will trend towards zero. So that's going to be another source of income for the system. And the third one will be these gateway payments that every individual data host accepts. All of these payments will be lumped together as the source of rewards. Now, these rewards will be given out based on the funding votes that users have cast. the more people that vote for Son of Odin's Bitcoin host, the more money, or I guess the more rewards Son of Odin's server will capture from all these rewards that are going through the system. So users will have a direct say over which servers will get funding. Now, a couple of concerns would come up immediately for something like this. Number one, well, who's to say that somebody can't just vote for themselves all the time? Yes, they can. And remember that everybody's votes are capped at how many tokens they have delegated. So if you want to have 1 million votes, you need to buy 1 million new tokens on chain, withdraw them from whatever DEX or SEX you're using, and delegate them, locking them up. Once they're locked, you'll have 1 million votes, and now you can give yourself those 1 million votes, but you paid a lot in order to do that. So that helps a little bit with the Sybil resistance. And in order to ensure that this constant stream of information is coming from users, both users and data hosts will be required to check in at least once a month to reaffirm that everything's okay. On the data host side, one transaction will need to be sent per month in order to basically say, yes, I'm still online. Yes, my payment gateways are still active. All the information is still accurate. So please keep me listed in the directory. If a data host forgets to send this transaction in a month, they will find that their data host is removed from the directory and can no longer be found by others. It's just a simple registration call to be added back in to the directory, but this helps keep the directory clean and current, because anybody who is in the directory, they've been active within the last month to reaffirm that, yes, my Ethereum host is still online and is still serving data. On the flip side, on the user side, users cast their funding votes as a sort of preference to the system. Amongst these 3 Ethereum data hosts that I could choose, I prefer Willie's first, and then I prefer John's second, and I prefer Elliot's third. I may give 60 funding votes to Willie, 30 funding votes to John, and only 10 funding votes to Elliot. Now, whenever my application launches and is trying to reach out to a variety of data hosts, it will follow my preferences first. It'll follow my funding votes first. Willie's data host will be hit first, and if it gives back data in a timely manner, that's all I need to do, and I've got my Ethereum data. But if for whatever reason Willie's server is offline or is not answering quickly enough, I'll fall back to my choice number 2, and John's server may answer immediately. Tomorrow I'll do the same thing. Willie is just spinning. For some reason, Willie's server is just not keeping up with the request load or is not answering me in a quick enough time. So I switch over again to John. After 2 or 3 days of switching over to John manually each time, I'm realizing that my first funding preference of funding Willie first doesn't really work for me. So I'm going to recast my funding votes to put John's server first in my preference list. I may even remove Willie entirely because he just hasn't answered in the last 3 days. And now John will have my funding votes. When it comes time for reward payments, John's server is going to get more payments and Willie's server is going to get less payments because in aggregate across the masses, people will reorder those servers in a way that gives them fast and accurate access to the data they need. And they will remove servers from their preference list that are simply not serving them. So that's one of the core changes, and it's this the use of people's preferences in aggregate in order to direct funds. I'm going to pause there in case there's any questions that I have not been reading in the DAO stage chat. A sec while I scroll. Willie, did I describe that accurately?
Yeah, that was perfect, I think. It sounds like Son of Odin had a question, but then maybe answered the question. Is this something you've considered? Would gateway payments be a decent mechanism to determine if a node is online or not?
Yes and no. Yeah, the gateway would have to be online in order to establish that like a smart contract style payment gateway. There would be a few different types of payment gateways, and some of them could simply be pay to an address. The data host doesn't necessarily have to respond when that payment comes in. I don't know if that answers your question, Odin. While we wait to, okay, it sounds like I answered that question. That's great. Devil, would you like to come up on stage, or do you just want to type out your question? Welcome.
What's up, Devil?
You look like you're muted, Devil. If you unmute yourself, you'll be able to ask your question in voice. If you can't figure out your mic, not a problem. Just type out your question and we can ask it here for you.
I think you may have already asked the question, which was, will there be nodes in Europe? Yeah. So my answer.
Oh, yes.
Feel free to correct it. Is that we won't have any control over where people operate their nodes, but if the system works, then individuals in Europe will be incentivized to run a node. As long as there are users in Europe who need blockchain data, then those users will be incentivized to delegate their funding votes to whichever validator provides the best experience and provides the data the accurate data the fastest. So yeah, the whole idea with this design is that the incentives themselves will be all that's needed, and the invisible hand will ensure that there's a good diversity of validators around the world close to where the users need that data.
Yeah, I can imagine user interfaces that would hook into FoxChain in the backend. Let's say the ShapeShift UI. If you're in the ShapeShift UI and you want to choose a gateway, sorry, in the ShapeShift UI and you want to choose a data host, and you live in Europe, you would probably want to sort the list by region and choose that European host. A lot of UIs will be able to hide a lot of this heavy lifting stuff so that the user doesn't have to click into any of this if they don't want to. For example, the moment you add Bitcoin as a coin to your wallet, it's clear that you're going to need a Bitcoin data host. A UI could figure out exactly what region you're in, either by IP-based geolocation or request metadata that identifies the locale of the user. And the UI can then automatically select a couple of random European nodes to assign as their Bitcoin hosts for that session. So the user wouldn't even have to think of any of it, and it's just going. Every single time that user would return, they would get another randomized host, and they wouldn't really have much control of that until they open up a separate page where they can now specify exactly which data host they want to use. Maybe they host their own and they want to always use their own, or maybe they want to find one that's run by a community member that they know and trust. Now the user can get as nitty-gritty as they choose to, sorting the list of data hosts by region, by connection type, by moniker. They can sort it alphabetically, and once they've chosen a couple that they like, they can then lock these in with their funding votes, which will make sure that the next time they return to use the same interface, the same servers will be used next time and time again until they change it. Odin, you asked a great question about payment gateways. I'm sharing or actually, you can navigate down how FoxChain data hosts gateway payments. This page talks a little bit about some ideas for gateway payments. One of the ideas came from a very smart gentleman about having a smart contract style payment gateway where a user could deposit, let's say, $20 worth of new token. That should be more than enough to cover their use of that data host over the next month. Now, every single request that is made is metered by that gateway. And if they paid for, let's say, 1,000 requests, now you have $9.99 left, now you have $9.98 left. And maybe only once throughout the month, a check-in transaction could be made to that smart contract saying, hey, out of the 1,000, only 200 have been used. That means there's still 800 left. So you won't need the chain bloat of writing every single individual request to the chain. And the smart contract can specify different check-in periods, different check-in quantities, and it'll be very flexible like that. That one is listed as the metered gateway payment on that gateway page.
I think the point about just the user experience is a really good point. I think that was one of the things that I was a little bit concerned about when I first heard the idea of funding votes, but I think I've come around to it, and I really like the concept, and I think that it'll be essential that we create a good user experience to help users make an informed decision on who they should delegate to. I love the idea of sorting by distance, and maybe also giving them some additional data they can use to see, okay, which of these validators has been returning the data the fastest. So I think that user experience is going to be critical. But also, I think a lot of you might be wondering, okay, voters or users tend to be pretty apathetic. Do we think there's going to be enough participation in this for the system to actually work? And
great question.
Yeah, I think the incentive is huge, right? Users are apathetic until you give them a nice APR, right? So these there'll be additional incentive for anyone who's delegating their new Fox tokens to be able to actually do the funding votes, so that they can earn some additional yield. But there's that additional incentive that's not necessarily financial, but just on the fact that based on whichever validators they vote for, that will determine who they're getting their data from. So there's a built-in incentive for users to actually select a validator that is the best validator for them and will provide the data the fastest. And yeah, I think it's going to be just critical that we do build a great user experience and make sure users see that, hey, they can earn this additional yield, and then they're not just randomly picking any validator just so they can get that yield, but they're actually taking a couple moments to decide, okay, which of these validators should I actually delegate to so I have the best experience. And this is very different to how Pocket Network's system operates. And that was a question higher up in the chat that I think, I know we're running low on time, but I do think, are you able to touch on the analysis of Pocket Network and the conclusions in that?
Holy crap! We only have a minute left on this this hour. I'm available to stay later, but is occupied at the top of this half hour. I'm going to plan to continue at least until the questions die down, or until someone from the mod squad comes in and kicks me off stage. Willie, you brought up a very great point about the apathy of users. So with traditional Cosmos-based systems, you delegate your tokens and then you forget it. Maybe next week or next month, you check in, you see you've got some rewards, you claim them, and then you forget about it again for another month. FoxChain will still have delegation, but the delegation rewards will be minuscule by comparison. So if you are planning on just delegating your new tokens to a FoxChain validator and forgetting it, you're going to be leaving a lot of money on the table. Money comes in with your user engagement. There's a lot of value in aggregate user information, and I hope that the marketing work stream has perked up their ears, and also the user experience team. So with these funding votes, you can say, these are the chains that I'm interested in. I'm interested only in Bitcoin and Monero and Litecoin, period. Or somebody else might be interested only in these 6 chains. You can cast your funding votes for chains without specifying data hosts. That will definitely get you more rewards than not casting any funding votes, but it's not going to give you the full potential of rewards that you could be getting if you do specify individual data hosts. If you go that extra mile and after trying out a couple of data hosts, you say, well, this Bitcoin server answered me more quickly than the others that I've tried. Not only am I interested in Bitcoin and Monero and Litecoin, but specifically this Bitcoin server was good for me, and this Litecoin server was good for me, and this Monero server was good for me. By providing that user feedback, it shows engagement, it shows which chains that one user is interested in following, and it also provides the important information to the chain to redirect payments to those servers that user selected. As long as the user remains engaged at least once per 30 days, and of course this will be configurable in with on-chain governance. If we don't like 30 days, we can extend it to 45 days or shorten it to 7 or whatever it is. As long as they're active, they will continue reaping much higher APRs than if they were not active. I see you got a hop, Willie. Thank you for joining me on the stage, and goodbye. I'm now reading the questions. Son of Odin asks, any thoughts on the cost of operating chains can vary? Bitcoin is relatively cheap, while Solana would be very expensive. So getting enough queries to make it economically viable to make it profitable is an interesting question for me. That is a great point. Not all chains are equal. So I have thought about this a little bit, and I think a lot of questions will be answered when we do have a prototype up. But the thinking I have in line with this is, let's say you have only one Bitcoin data host. Son of Odin, you are a Bitcoin fan. You're hosting one Bitcoin host. Now, as 100 users start using that Bitcoin host, it's serving data, no problem. Maybe there's 1,000 users, maybe there's 10,000 users. At some point, if that's the only Bitcoin data host, it's going to start to fall over with load. Now, because it's the only Bitcoin data host, it's going to be receiving all of the rewards from everybody who has said, I'm interested in funding Bitcoin. So you're going to make a lot of money, but you will eventually fall over. When a second data host comes online, users can now start to choose that one. The rewards will be divided between the two unless one of them has a lot more funding votes than the other. It's my hope that over time, the wisdom of the crowds, people will fund the full servers less because the full servers are not answering quickly enough. And they will start funding the empty servers more because they are answering more quickly until the point where they get overfunded and they get overswarmed with way too many users, and then it'll all sort of happen again. The way I'm playing this out in my mind, I think the theory is that it will equalize over time, and as long as these data hosts are earning enough to pay to keep these servers online, they'll keep doing it. The moment that they stop doing that, now it may make sense for FoxChain governance with its own on-chain voting system to put up a proposal to add more incentive payments to one specific chain over another, because Solana is not receiving enough love. And through a combination of governance votes and the wisdom of the masses, I'm hoping that that will address your concern. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that if you think that my answer is insufficient. Awesome, thank you. What about, okay, Giant Kin asks, what about just a user putting up something that helps? Any real advantage to chain, ignoring any rewards? I'm not sure I follow your question, Giant Kin. Would you mind restating it in text or jumping up here to ask in voice? Trying to find you. There you are, Giant Kin.
I don't do that well
Gotcha.
on voice.
So will you be able to run a data host on a Raspberry Pi? Is that your question?
Yeah, sure. That'll work.
I admit I've not taken a look at any of the newer Raspberry Pis, but in order to be a data host in FoxChain, you have to host two things alongside each other. One is the blockchain daemon, and I do know that Bitcoin D runs great on a Raspberry Pi. The other is a unchained database, and this will be a lot weightier. I'm not familiar enough with the latest specs of a Raspberry Pi, but as long as whatever hardware you're running on has enough RAM to keep things in state so that it isn't paging out of RAM all the time, and enough processing power to simultaneously do some SQL lookups over here while answering some network requests over there, I would imagine it would be okay. But you'll have to, you know what? I'd love to see you test that when we are working on our prototype to see just how well that performs. And I should mention that airdrop recipients, one of the categories of airdrop recipients is going to be FoxChain testers. If you know how to run Bitcoin D or any kind of blockchain daemon, and you don't mind running it just to help test it while we're still in a test net and things are not fully incentivized, when there is the final airdrop, everybody who was on that tester list and was giving some of their time and some of their CPU cycles to do it, they will receive additional airdrop tokens over and above what they would normally receive from their Ethereum or Cosmos or whatever other addresses that were eligible. So you can get some Raspberry Pi love in there in the airdrop. Awesome. We've already got people signing up for a tester. Thanks, Devil. Odin, you've asked some great questions, and I see you're typing up another one now. I'm going to invite you on stage. You can deny if you'd rather not, but it may just be easier.
Oh, hello.
Hello, Odin. Welcome.
Mr. Perklin, good to talk to you, good sir. Yes, I had this kind of funny thought of like, what are the chances that people aren't going to run the full daemons, the chain daemons, and instead just create little like converter to like blockchain.com or something like this, where they just query, if you get an API, key from blockchain.com or one of these like, API services, centralized API services, and just wrap it.
Great question. So there's actually two questions in that one question. I'm going to isolate both and answer both. Number one is, what if someone just chooses not to run Unchained and they only run Bitcoin D? In a case like that, because the user interface requirements for something using FoxChain will require the user interface to show, oh, I'm trying to connect to Perklin's Bitcoin host. I'm trying to connect to Perklin, I failed. Now I'm going to try to connect to Odin. Because the user is going to be seeing that, they're going to try to connect to your Unchained database, and it's not going to be there. It's not going to be answering, and it'll fail over to someone else. Over time, when they keep seeing that Perklin is failing them and they're not getting the data that they need, the Unchained data that they need from Perklin, they should update their preference list by casting funding votes to some other server, and now that other server will be tried first, and they'll get fast answers immediately. So that mitigates the issue of people choosing to run one but not the other. Over time, people will just not fund the ones that aren't hosting all the data that they need. Next, when it comes to running a relay, you absolutely can run a relay, and there isn't necessarily anything wrong for that. If I ask Son of Odin for a Bitcoin question, and then he asks Gray Machine, and Gray Machine gives Odin the answer, and then Odin relays that answer to me, I got my answer. And I can now build whatever transactions I need to build, or I can see my historical balance. So as a user, I'm good. And I don't really care if Son of Odin asked 5 people, 5 of his friends, or asked nobody. I'm happy. But you, as the guy who's running the relayer, you're now taking on a little bit of a risk because you don't really control what Gray Machine is going to do with his machine. Sure, it was online today when you set up the relay, but tomorrow when he goes offline, and now I'm asking Odin, hey, give me an answer to this Bitcoin question. Odin spins saying, well, I can't relay a good answer for you. Over time, I'm going to now delegate, sorry, not delegate. I'm now going to move my funding votes from your server to another server, and you'll find that you'll be losing money over time. In other systems like the Pocket Network and the Graph, they have technical controls and technical measurements that meter individual packets and make sure that you are doing a good job as a data host. FoxChain is taking a different approach. Rather than doing all the heavy lifting and heavy database work of metering and measuring, or running, Pocket Network calls it a fisherman, running a service to ping 1,000 different hosts and look at the response times and then upload that giant CSV to a smart contract to issue payments. All that is just a lot of extra work, and it's over and above what needs to happen, and that is give the Bitcoin answers to people who have Bitcoin questions. So FoxChain's design is to use user incentives to drive the behavior you want rather than technical controls. And I'm excited for when the prototype gets built so that we can see how this works in a more real world. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I was just thinking of the idea that somebody might wrap the Unchained API and then query. You said Gray Matter or Gray Machine, whatever it was called, but then there's also maybe 5 other providers, and it might end up being cheaper to operate and therefore higher profits to do it that way as a provider of information, even though you're not actually running any actual infrastructure.
I would absolutely expect every data host to go to great lengths to optimize their hosts, both for costs and for the quantity of users. More users they can serve, that's more funding votes that they will attract, so the more money that they will make. And whether you're going to wrap another service, relay something, or run it on a cluster, or maybe you want to run it on centralized AWS and just pay the bill, or maybe you happen to have a really fast internet connection and a old computer that's collecting dust. However you want to optimize it, as long as users are able to get the answers to their questions, FoxChain is accomplishing its mission.
Yeah, it makes sense that if you run your own infrastructure, your query time or your API response time will be faster than querying some other HTTP server, some other part of the world. So you're just doing it all locally, and so you'll probably have a faster query time. So it makes sense what Marley just said in the chat of just having your own ETH node, and then if your ETH node dies or is whatever happens to it, then it has a failover option where it just goes back to an inferior key to get to be a failover just in case something happens to your ETH node, and then you fix your ETH node and everything's come back online and just carry on without having any downtime from your user's perspective.
That's a great idea, and it's already included. If you take a look at in the How FoxChain section, there's a Cosmos Messages page in the Notion. The message host online, it's the first message. This is what a data host will send to the FoxChain blockchain to say, I'm registering a brand new Ethereum host. One of the parameters in there is a backup host. It's an optional parameter, but if you do include it, you can say, hey, if I go offline for whatever reason, you should start using Odin's Ethereum server. And interfaces should be respecting that. So the moment that that Marley's server is not reachable, it'll automatically fail over to Odin's and get the data served.
Oh, neat. Okay, so I can run 2 different nodes to have them fail over to each other, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that.
And there's also a maintenance message a little bit lower. This is designed for the many times that people have to run maintenance. In Thorchain, there's the benefit of being active or inactive, and you can run all your maintenance when you're inactive. But with FoxChain, something can happen immediately, and now your stuff is offline, and you realize that it's going to take you maybe 2 hours to get it fixed up. You can issue one of these maintenance messages to let people know, hey, I've acknowledged that my server's down. I'm going to bring it online before this time, or I expect it to take 2 hours to fix. In the meantime, you should use this host. So you can either do it after the maintenance window has been abruptly started without your consent, or you can use it in advance and schedule it and say, as of block height 1, 2, 3, 4 in the future, I will be going offline for 24 hours to run maintenance, and then I'll be online again. It should help with unexpected outages like that.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense. I like it.
All right, I see there's a general slowing down of questions being asked in the stage chat. I don't like talking about things just for the sake of talking about it, but I love answering questions and teaching you about the things that you want to learn. So ask away if you got them. Otherwise, we'll end it.
Hello, Michael. It's Josh
Hey,
here.
it's Josh AF. How's it going?
Josh AF. That's right. I had a question. I heard you say earlier, and from what I've understood, you'll need to run any validator, or more than a validator provider will need to run the blockchain daemon and also the version of Unchained. Will it also need to run a FoxChain node, or can that be totally separate and they'll just have to register like via a blockchain? I saw there's some new message types, register that they're online, and they don't have to run a FoxChain node themselves.
Great question. In the very early designs of this, it was required to also run a FoxChain node, but that was seen as an unnecessary encumbrance. In this latest design, you do not have to run a FoxChain node if you don't want to. You will have to connect to a FoxChain node every now and then to issue your register messages and to collect your payments and things like that. But you don't have to run one on your own at all.
And so each request for data, like a client requesting data from what do we call? Is it called a data host? That's it. There's a
Yes.
FoxChain validator, and there's also a FoxChain data host. The data host is what needs to run the Bitcoin daemon and
Unchained.
Unchained, right? Okay. So and then when the data host, so clients just calling the data host directly, is it only if the client has an issue and wants to report, hey, I think there's a bad actor? That's an on-chain action, right? The direct interaction, client asking for data host responding, those are not on-chain actions. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, the only actions that happen on FoxChain involve the directory and involve payments. So if you're adding your Bitcoin host to the directory, that's a FoxChain transaction. If you're removing it from the directory or you're updating it in the directory, that is a FoxChain action. From the payment side of it, if your DAO wants to pay for all of the DAO members to use FoxChain for the next month, your DAO will issue a FoxChain message that sets up a payment gateway for 1,000 people. If you have a company of 10 people and you want to secure Ethereum access for all 10 of your employees, that's a FoxChain action to pay for it. But after the payments are made and after the data hosts are registered in the directory, everything else happens just between the data hosts and the users without any FoxChain interaction at all.
Don't and maybe all of this has changed since I last remember it, but don't the different data hosts talk to each other about confirming that they're on the right block number and keeping each other kind of legit and honest and stuff like that? Is that
your memory is not bad at all? Your memory is great. That actually was part of the original design. But through a lot of discussions with other protocol engineers, Son of Odin being one of them in the audience here, the realization was made that message is very useless. Because anybody can look up the latest Bitcoin hash and say, hey, I can see the latest Bitcoin hash is this. There's no proof that you actually got that from your own Bitcoin daemon, or you got that from a public block explorer, and you're just timestamping it so that you can collect your rewards. So because it didn't prove anything, it only just bloated the original chain's design with a bunch of useless everything's okay messages over and over again.
Huh. And then this seems like this got a lot simpler then since. Got it. Oh, that's, I mean.
It did. And again, I have to credit many in the audience, most specifically Son of Odin, for being a great sounding board to help flesh out and simplify a lot of the design.
So it then was it also simplified out this process that you report a bad actor and like penalize a bad actor, and you're basically, are we just leaving it to the clients to realize, oh, this data host sucks, stop using it, and the payment is only. I'm making some assumptions here, so please correct.
That assumption is correct. So another piece of the original design involved a bunch of evidence that you can post online to basically charge someone with serving you bad data. Let's say I connect to Elmut's server, and Elmut tells me that I have 1 Bitcoin when I really only have half a Bitcoin. I modeled out a couple of scenarios where bad data could be given to a user, and what does it mean for the user? What does it mean for the data host? What does it mean for everything? Now, if you know that you need to send you have to send a transaction that is critical to you or your business, chances are you're already going to do things like double check the address before you send it. If you're using something like a ledger, you're going to make sure that you're sending it to the right address. If you're asking someone for their address, you might even ask them already, here, give it to me in Telegram and give it to me in Slack, because now it'll be harder to hack both at the exact same time. So anybody who already uses crypto is going to double check information if the transaction is critical. So if I've connected to Elmut's Bitcoin server and I get an answer saying that I have 1 Bitcoin balance, it'll be just a click away to disconnect from Elmut's server and to connect to PastaGo server and say, hey, what's my balance? Oh, you have half a Bitcoin. Wait a minute. Elmut's server said I had 1. Pasta says I have half. Let me connect to Gomes server and see what we get there. Oh, okay, this one also says I have half. Pasta and Gomes, they agree. It's probably I do have this half a Bitcoin. And now you can craft the transaction with that data and send it. So the user will be, the user has the option to be as protected as they want by querying as many of these FoxChain nodes as they desire based on the makeup of the transaction they're about to send. But moreover, if I know that Elmut's server gave me bad data and he was the one that I tried first, well, I'm probably not going to try him first tomorrow because maybe his data was stale and he wasn't being malicious. It's just he's back a couple of blocks and it didn't account for the latest transactions on my address. Over time, the data hosts that are giving either bad data or out of date data, in aggregate, they should be making fewer rewards because everyone is casting their funding votes to the servers that are fast, that are reliable, and that are always online when they need them. So yeah, no more evidence stuff either. Again, simplifying the design.
Yeah, got a lot simple. This is seeming like really quite like much more doable also, right? Because there's so much less complexity. It can be implemented more quick. There's all kinds of things. At least the technology mechanics seem very achievable.
I'd like to think so. And awesome. Over the last few months, in January, I estimated that we could probably have a prototype network up in September. And as time marched on and it was taking longer and longer to flesh out the design, that runway was getting shorter and shorter, and I was fearing that we would have to push out the estimated date to get a prototype online. But with the design getting simpler and simpler, with entire sections just being cut out like fat, because through more analysis, we didn't actually need to do those things. It actually means that I still stand behind a September prototype date, just because it is significantly easier to implement today with the latest revisions in the design.
Yeah, awesome. So payment then is just based on how many requests you serve? That's how you get, that's how the data host would get paid? Uh-oh, Perklin went on mute. Does that mean I need to stall?
Oh, no, sorry, I was talking and apparently I accidentally muted myself. There are a couple of different payment gateways that are contemplated. One of them is the metered gateway. With a metered gateway, there's a smart contract that would meter how many requests you consume over time, and it'll charge you on a per request basis. For gateways that want that kind of a metered control, they can use this payment gateway. But that's not the only gateway that will be supported. And who's to say that we can't conceive of even more gateways in the future? Another fun one is a token locked gateway. In the case of the Ethereum blockchain, an Ethereum host can elect to receive a batch payment and then only let people in if they have a certain number of tokens on their address as of a certain block height. A great use case would be the ShapeShift DAO. Maybe the ShapeShift DAO treasury wants to pay $10,000 to TaxiStake so that TaxiStake can serve all blockchain data to every single ShapeShift user, to every single Fox token holder. I'm going to share a copy link, go to the stage chat. All right, I just shared a link to the gateway payments section on Notion. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom of this page, here's an example of how one data host, an Ethereum data host specifically, could lock it so that token 0xC770, which is the Fox token, minimum 100 Fox tokens held as of block height 1525 yada yada through 1546 yada yada. With something like this, as long as you held 100 Fox tokens, you can now talk to any of these data hosts that have a token gateway on it. And of course, there's just completely open gateways so that it doesn't do any checks. And there's also closed gateways with API keys so that only me and my 3 friends can access it. It should be flexible for people to pick and choose how they want to get paid for the data hosts that they are hosting.
Cool, man. Hey, appreciate you answering all those questions, even though maybe you've answered them before. Hopefully they were all helpful for other people too.
These are the first time these questions were asked since the last update, and it directly involved a lot of changes in the design from the last time this was spoken about on stage. So don't feel bashful about having to ask a stupid question. It wasn't stupid at all. It was, if anything, it was a very informed question. All right, I'm going to pop into the stage chat here. Thank you, Devil, for copy pasting stuff in there. Oh, Son of Odin asks, how are block rewards divided amongst the data hosts? Great question. Let me just get a little bit of liquid and then I'll answer this one. Okay, a lot of talking. So there are a couple of on-chain variables that would govern this, and these would be tweakable by governance. I'll be throwing out some examples, but these will not be the final values. First off, there's going to be, for lack of a better word, there's going to be a tax that is levied on gateway payments. Regardless of what gateway type a data host may choose, maybe they want the smart contract payment type, maybe they want batch payments, or however they're going to accept their payments. Let's say 10% of every one of these payments is going to be siphoned off and distributed to all other data hosts. I say 10%, but again, governance can tweak this to be 2% or 20% or however governance wants to set it. 10% of all of these gateway payments will be siphoned off, and that 10% will be added to the reward pie. The reward pie is filled up with these 10% of gateway payments and incentive payments, which will be a lot early and very little late, and on-chain actions like casting funding votes or updating your data host. All of these payments will come into the reward router, for the lack of a better term, a reward router. All these payments will be divided based on the funding votes cast by all the users. So if users that specify individual hosts will route more payments to those specific data hosts. Payments that are funded, funding votes that are given to blockchains in aggregate, like I support Monero, but I'm not really specifying any individual host. They'll be divided evenly amongst all of the online and available Monero hosts. And data hosts that are not funded at all won't receive those tiny payments. So what this means is, even if you are a closed data host and you're not accepting any gateway payments on chain, and you're not really participating in anything, but you are serving some small closed set of users, over time, you will still get trickle payments because you were listed as a server in FoxChain. Did that answer your question, Odin? I tried to throw together some pie graphs in the funding votes section. Yes, please, I encourage you to think it through. Evan, I'm reading your question now. So I invested in Fox once the circulating supply was 90 million. It was inflated to 380 million within 8 months. Now I'll be airdropped a new token for FoxChain, which will also be highly inflationary. Who's to say that it was highly inflationary? I don't remember saying that about FoxChain. Just feels like early investors are getting the shaft, unless I'm missing something. I do think you're looking at it in the wrong way, Evan, in two different ways. Number one, there are 1 billion Fox tokens. Now, when you chose to purchase your Fox tokens from whatever market you purchase your Fox tokens, sure, there may have been fewer users using it then, and now there are more users using it now. But the overall supply was left unchanged, and it was always known that the ShapeShift DAO is constantly receiving a public Sablier stream of a lot of tokens, and the ShapeShift DAO would be using these tokens from this Sablier stream to pay all the DAO members that are doing work for the ShapeShift DAO. So over time, it was a known to anyone who was looking at the ShapeShift DAO that the circulating supply was set to increase. Now, at the time that you purchased those tokens, I assume that you did your own research before investing in those. Now, the second part of your question involved FoxChain. FoxChain will not be highly inflationary forever. It will be similar to Bitcoin in that in the earlier days, there are more new tokens being minted than there are in later days. But overall, it will be a deflationary token, just like Bitcoin, in that less and less will be issued until the cap is reached. Those tokens that are created, once the last new token is created, they will all be circulating around on the open market as people get them on the open market to pay for gateways, as data hosts sell these off to pay their server costs, this sort of closed loop system will be similar to how Bitcoin works, but it'll all be centered around the use of data. Well, I'm not sure if it's bearish or bullish for the token price for the first few years, because we don't even know what the token price is for the first day, let alone the first few years. Every system that involves a token will have ups and downs, and it really depends on the success of the platform and the success of the technology that dictates what it will be worth tomorrow. I'm glad you're keeping an eye on things that you are choosing to invest in. Never lose that spirit, because you need to be informed in order to make informed decisions. Yes, you will be able to delegate your tokens to validators, but you'll also be able to cast funding votes. And these funding votes that you cast, in exchange for the information you are feeding into the system, you will earn revenue for that information. As a user, what this means is you can't set it and forget it like you can with other Cosmos systems. With Atom, you can delegate atoms and forget about it, and at some point tomorrow you'll return and see that you've made some rewards. FoxChain will not be like that. You will still have to delegate your new tokens, but in addition to that, you will have to cast your funding votes in order to earn higher APRs. As long as you're regularly casting your funding votes, you will earn a higher APR than you would otherwise. And because inflation trends to zero, all the rewards you make will absolutely not only keep up with inflation, but they will beat inflation, because over time, inflation will drop and trend to zero. All right, well, I don't see any other questions in the chat, and I don't see any hands in the audience. We've already gone about 40 minutes over. This may be a good place to cut it. Thank you, everybody, for attending and listening to the latest update on FoxChain. I encourage you to flip through the Notion documents. And if you have questions or comments about the current design, about the upcoming airdrop, or if you feel that you can contribute to either, I encourage you to ask any of the community mods here to give you the FoxChain role. You may even be able to do that yourself with the role selector, and that'll give you access to the public FoxChain channels, where we'll be talking about all things FoxChain. To the community mods, if you could restart the lo-fi beats, I'd be appreciative. And thank you, everybody, for attending my TED Talk. Have a great day.